I will take motions 38 and 39 together as a single debate along with paragraph 3.6 of the General Counsel's report. First, I will call the mover and seconder of motion 38, Disabled Workers Oppose Welfare Reforms. I will then call the mover and seconder of motion 39, Oppose Disability Benefits Cuts Emergency. I will then open the debate to other speakers. I now call paragraph 3.6 and motion 38, Disabled Workers Oppose Welfare Reforms. Congress, the General Counsel support both motion 38 and 39 with explanation. I will call on the TUC Assistant General Secretary to explain the position on behalf of the General Counsel. Motion 38 will be moved by Unison on behalf of the TUC Disabled Workers Conference. It will be seconded by Unite. Unison, please.
President, Congress, Angela Hamilton, Unison, moving motion 38 on behalf of Disabled Workers Conference. Congress, the government's attempts at welfare reform are shambolic. Deleting the dedicated Minister for Disability in favour of a social security and disability role makes it clear the government think the only thing that matters to disabled people is benefits. Not jobs, not housing, transport, health, or the million and one other things that actually affect our lives. This is probably because they've continued the Tory approach of listening to self-proclaimed disability experts, people with an interest in disability, instead of talking to real disabled people with real lived experience. This might explain how they came up with the ridiculous 4 points in one category criteria for PIP. Seriously, Larry the cat could have done better. When that didn't work, they tried a first come, first serve approach to disability benefits, based on when you became disabled, not the support you actually need. Never mind Larry, my cat Lily could have done better this time. When that didn't work, but let's give credit where credit's due. The Prime Minister is pretty good at soothing Donald Trump's fragile ego, but by his own admission, he hasn't focused on domestic issues. Luckily for him, our very own Angie Rayner had her finger on the pulse. She managed to pull them back from the brink of defeat. Who can forget Stephen Timms running into the chamber at the last minute, interrupting the debate to announce concessions just before the vote? It was like something out of a comedy. But let's be clear, we might have won the battle, but we haven't won the war. We kicked the can down the road, but that might end up being an own goal if the government used secondary legislation to bring in the changes. And recent changes to the Cabinet make that increasingly likely. Angela Rayner acted with integrity when she held her hands up and admitted she'd made a mistake and resigned from the government. But where does that leave disabled people? Did Starmer bring back the Minister for Disability role? No. Did he bring back well-respected disabled MP Vicky Foxcroft? No. Did he listen to people who aren't afraid to speak truth to power, like my own MP Emma Lewell? You guessed it, no. He made a man who compared PIP to his children's pocket money his new Chief Secretary. And yes, I know he's apologised, but if he had half the integrity of our Angie, he'd have resigned for insulting millions of disabled people. He made Pat McFadden the new Secretary of Work and Pensions. Don't be fooled by Pat's gently spoken, softly approach. He's been brought in to force through welfare reform, and he is one tough cookie. In 2018, he called PIP broken, inhumane at times. Now he defends cutting PIP by saying it will stop dependence on benefits without the opportunity to work. Well, Mr McFadden, I depend on PIP to work. If you take it off me, the Treasury will lose over £400 a month more in tax and national insurance than they give me in PIP. And I will lose my job, because without PIP I won't be able to work. And if you times that by millions, thousands, millions, hundreds of thousands of other people like me, they will lose millions, if not billions. Congress, if I'm honest, we should have known there was a rabbit away when the Labour Party's campaign slogan was just one word: change. What does change actually mean? I hoped it meant change for the better, but change can easily be replaced by another word: reform. Reform of winter fuel payments, reform of how we treat asylum seekers and migrant workers, reform of support for WASPy women, and now reform of disabled people's benefits. Congress, this isn't the change we voted for. These are the changes Reform want. Disabled people are terrified of these changes, frightened of losing their jobs, so scared some of them have told me that they're thinking of taking their own lives. Just let that sink in. Taking their own lives. So Pat, if you're listening, here's my message to you, to Keir Starmer and the Labour government. It's not too late to bring about change for the better, but it soon will be. It's time to stop listening to people who want to destroy our movement and who think disabled people are a drain on society. Start listening to the people who created the Labour Party, to trade unions and the working people, including disabled workers you claim to represent. We know welfare needs to change, and we are here to help you. Start listening to the people who want a Labour government to succeed, to be the best it possibly can. And please, stop trying to out-reform reform. Congress, I move.
Thank you, Angela. Very bang on time. Appreciate speakers keeping to time. Thank you, Angela. Unite, please.
Bear with me a second, get my glasses.
No, you take your time.
Martin Gwyther, seconding this motion for the TUC Disability Workers' Conference. This motion is about finally bringing an end to the hostile environment that the last government built against disabled people. It's time to end the humiliating, dehumanising process of getting help. It's time to support people into work, not make the lives of disabled people even harder. The reality is that PIP eligibility is based on whether someone's impairment or health condition affects their day-to-day life. We have been left with a system where people are made to feel guilty or undeserving of desperately needed support. 3 million people receive PIP, a 3% increase on last year. That's 3 million people who endured what one claimant described as psychological warfare. I never spoke of weeping at the outcome due to the sheer relief of getting through the process. Our motion calls on the government to prove it's on the side of disabled workers. We call for a new, fair and caring system. This must include replacing the tick box assessment with proper discussions with medical professions. Give real support for people whose impairments are difficult and not always visible. End privatisation. There is no place for profiteering in our welfare system. Congress, please support. I second.
Thank you, Martin. I now call motion 39, Opposed Disability Benefits Emergency. The motion will be moved by Joe Cooper on behalf of the TUC Trades Council Conference and seconded by NEU. Joe. Welcome, Joe.
Congress, President, comrades, Joe Cooper, representing the Trades Councils. First time at Congress, first time speaker. Congress, even before the government's attacks on our country's disabled population, The rights and protections of disabled people stood and stands as unforgivably inadequate and humiliating, disproportionately affecting working class disabled people, making this a class issue. What value is a working class person under capitalism who cannot work or cannot work to spec? For millions of disabled people in this country, they live those punishments on a daily basis. They are constantly reminded they are a burden, they are a waste of resources, that they are not value for money. These are our people. These are our comrades. When this motion was drafted, the government's welfare bill threatened to strip up to 1.2 million disabled people of between 4,200 and 6,300 a year, taking £6.7 billion directly out of disabled people's pockets. Campaigning has already forced concessions. The harshest PIP clause, the new 4-point rule, was dropped. And existing universal credit health element claimants will now continue to see inflation-linked increases, but it is only a partial victory. The danger remains. New claimants will still lose out, and PIP changes are only postponed to a review. And the bill as passed still entrenches cuts for the future. And we cannot ignore the wider climate. The right, Reform UK and its regressive bedfellows, are pushing rhetoric that denies and erases disabled people's realities, talking of overdiagnosis, of blaming benefit claimants for the state of the economy. This disability erasure is not just words. Follow the trajectory. Where does this end, Congress? Trade unions and charities have warned clearly the harm that this discourse brings, and that is why our movement is vital. Here in the Trades Council movement, Leeds TUC put the fight against disability cuts centre stage of their May Day rally. They now ensure that DPAC observers are present at their meetings. Many trade councils across Britain are doing the same. Together we've written to MPs and councillors demanding they take a stand. We take to the streets with the message of solidarity, working with our communities to raise awareness and opposition to these shameless cuts. This is the Trades Council movement at its best, uniting workplace and community and giving a platform to disabled people themselves. Comrades, send delegates to your local trades councils. Help us build the movement. Help us amplify trade unionism across every city, town and village in our country. So Congress, this motion calls for a properly resourced and supportive social security system, and not a punitive, but a supportive assessment system, protection for carers and young people, and investment in our public services. And crucially, it calls on the TUC to coordinate demonstrations and sustained campaigning. We want to make it impossible for any government, even a Labour government, to ignore our demands. Congress, let's defend disabled people and build the power of our movement in their defence. I move.
Thank you, Joe. Another great speech from a first-timer. Well done, Joe. So the motion will be seconded by NEU. I will then call Kate to give the explanation. I will take some additional speakers, so just give you advance warning. Prospect, PCS, Unison, CWU, UCU, NUJ, and NASUWT. Sorry for the delay, Colleen. Welcome to the platform.
Thank you. President, Conference, Colleen Johnson from the National Education Union, speaking in this joint debate and seconding motion 39. So, you know, this debate has obviously composites and, well, puts together two separate motions about the same thing. And it was around this issue that there was a lot of anger and concern at TUC Disabled Workers Conference. And it's true to say that a lot has happened since then, because that was the time that both of these motions were written. So there's been a lot has happened, and a lot of action by disabled people's organisations and trade councils, and some shifting by the government. But the battle is not over yet. Rumours abound of welfare reform being looked at again by the government, with Nigel Farage too stating he's the man to sort it all out. So let's look at the real issues. Disabled people want to work. Some can only manage part-time and a few won't be able to work at all, but the vast majority want and indeed need to work. So what stops them? It's simply inaccessible workspaces and a lack of adjustments, including a lack of disability leave. That's why the NAU created the Disability Equality Toolkit, to help members collectivise around these important issues. In May, we surveyed our members and found that 76% of disabled members who responded to our survey received PIP, personal independence payments, with 63% of those members saying they wouldn't be able to work without them. They told us it helped them with transport to and from work, allowed them to work reduced hours so they could manage their impairments better, and in some cases it helped ensure they had enough energy to get through the working day. Only 24% of respondents got access to work, with some saying that if they didn't get it, they would need a more flexible timetable. So obviously PIP and access to work are crucial to disabled people thriving in the workplace. Currently, those with existing PIP will receive it until their next review, but new applicants will face new rules and more are likely to be unsuccessful. Our concern is that this will affect people being able to train as teachers and TAs. It will stop them accessing jobs and remaining in work. This loss of support will mean we lose valuable teachers and essential support staff. It won't help the recruitment and retention crisis. If the government are serious about building an inclusive education system, it has to have the widest range of staff as well as students. These cuts are sending a message that disabled educators are not wanted, and the cuts must be seriously challenged. We should not have a government pandering to negative right-wing stereotypes of disabled people. They should lead by example. Conference support both motions, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Colleen. I now ask Kate Bell to give the explanation before taking additional speakers. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, President. Congress, the TUC has been vocal in its opposition to the government cuts proposed to social security. We have demanded that no changes are made to support for disabled workers without the voices of disabled workers being heard. Our opposition helped stop government's plans on personal independence payment, and we will continue to campaign for a fair, decent social security system for all disabled people and against cuts that would devastate their livelihoods. The motion calls for a range of actions by the TUC in response to the government's original plans, including a demonstration, a lobby of Parliament, a weekend demonstration, and an accessible static lobby of Parliament. So the TUC will consult with the General Council on the most effective and most accessible form of action to raise our voice against any further planned cuts and ensure that the voices of disabled workers are heard. And with that explanation, the General Council support both motions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. So I'll now take additional speakers. Prospect, please, next. And could PCS be ready?
President, Conference, Amy Bishop, Prospect, speaking in support. First-time delegate, first-time speaker. So for 2004 to 2025, disabled households needed, on average, an additional £1,095 a month to have the same standards of living as non-disabled households. The estimated shortfall in disabled household income between extra costs and PIP is £630. On average, this is 67% of household income. This shortfall is only predicted to rise, especially with the planned social security changes. Campaigning was effective in making the government make some concessions in the Universal Credit and PIP bill. However, they still plan to make significant cuts to the amount of universal credit that sick and disabled people receive, with some protection for existing UC claimants, leading to a two-tier system. They may have taken the PIP plans out of the bill, but the scope of the TIMS review of PIP is wide-ranging, with a target of making PIP sustainable to support generations to come. And I think we can all agree that this pretty much always means cuts. Despite what many think, PIP is non-means tested, and there are many claimants who do work. Cutting their PIP could very easily push them out of work, the exact opposite to what the government wants to achieve. Disabled people spend their PIP on a wide range of cuts, including pre-prepared meals, cleaners, therapies they can't get on the NHS, higher utilities bills, much-needed disability-related equipment, and much, much more. With social care being cut so much due to tight council budgets, many disabled people do not qualify for their support either. With lower PIP payments, or without PIP at all, they will struggle to get by without the support they need, making it even more challenging than it is already to stay in work. Once disabled people fall out of work, it is much harder to find new work. Have you ever tried searching for accessible good part-time jobs, or those that are advertised with flexible working? They are few and far between. In the current job market, there is a lot of competition for each vacancy, and even if it's never directly stated, an employer is much more likely to employ the non-disabled person, even though we all know that disabled workers have been proven to be good and loyal employees. We cannot allow the government to decimate the support system for disabled people in the UK. Please support this motion.
Thank you, Amy. Brilliant job. Brilliant job. First time speaker. First time delegate. PCS, please. Unison next, but PCS, thank you.
Thank you, President Congress. Hannah David, PCS, speaking in support of motion 38. This motion calls on Congress to stand in solidarity with disabled workers and oppose the government's proposed reforms to PIP and UC, which threaten to push hundreds of thousands of disabled people into poverty, unemployment and social exclusion. This is an issue close to my union's heart, not only because of how many members or the friends and family members currently or one day may rely on them, but also because many of our members are the ones who work at DWP administering them. This government plans to cut £5 billion from PIP, with changes including a new eligibility threshold requiring claimants to score at least 4 points on the daily living activity. These changes will result in 370,000 current PIP recipients losing entitlement and 430,000 future claimants being denied support. The average loss per affected person is estimated at £4,500 per year, with some losing up to £6,300 annually. Universal credit health elements will be frozen for existing claimants and reduced for new ones, affecting 2.25 million people, with average losses of £500 to £3,000 per year. PIP is not an out-of-work benefit. It's a lifeline, not a luxury. It supports disabled people with extra costs of living with a disability, including therapies not accessible on the NHS, accessible transport, and specialist equipment like I use and without which I wouldn't be able to work. According to Scope's disability price tag in 2025, disabled households face £1,095 in extra costs per month, or £13,140 per year, And by 2030, this will rise to £1,224 per month, or £14,688 per year. I know I shouldn't have put so many numbers in this. The average PIP payment is £465 per month, leaving £630 in a monthly shortfall. The government's focus on cutting disability benefits while under-resourcing tax enforcement is not economically coherent, and it's morally indefensible. Disabled workers already earn 20% less than non-disabled peers on average, and 31% of disabled workers are part-time compared to 25% of the general workforce. Many disabled people require flexible or part-time roles to remain in work, yet only 12% of jobs offer part-time options, dropping to 7%. It's good to focus on the fact that tax evasion avoidance costs the UK, by the government's own estimate, £47 billion annually, with PCS estimating the figures to be as much as twice this. These cuts are political choice. They are choosing to spend our money elsewhere. It's a violence against us all, and we must all loudly oppose them together. So please, dear comrades, support motion 38 and the others.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Hannah. I slipped up earlier announcing the speakers. Actually, the next speaker will be CWU, followed by UCU. CWU, please. Apologies for the short notice.
President Congress Starr-Elliott, CWU, to support this motion. I stand before you today with a heavy heart and an unwavering commitment to speak on a matter of profound importance. The government's spring statement had ignited a fire of anger and indignation among us. The statement proposes significant welfare changes to personal independence payment and universal credit that threaten the very livelihood of disabled individuals across our nation. Let us be clear. The proposed cuts of £5 billion from personal independence payment represent an unacceptable assault on the dignity and rights of disabled people. These cuts are not mere numbers on a spreadsheet. They are the potential loss of critical support for individuals who rely on these payments to cover essential disability-related costs. Costs that often include therapies unavailable on the NHS and other support that enable disabled individuals to maintain their employment and contribute to society. Now, with the government proposed cut, we risk pushing individuals into unemployment, isolating them from their communities, and deepening their financial insecurity. These proposals do not diminish the financial autonomy of disabled individuals. They strip away choice and agency. By cutting these vital benefits, the government is sending a clear message that the lives of disabled people are less valued. This narrative of blame perpetuated by the Tory and Labour government and those within the media is not only misguided but dangerous. It ignored the evidence presented by disabled people's organisations and charities which have tirelessly worked to highlight the damage these cuts will inflict. It is a narrative that seeks to shift responsibility away from the state and onto some of the most vulnerable members of our society. We must demand that the government listen to the lived experience of disabled people and the expertise of their advocates and not those with financial interests such as the Fat Cat disability assessment companies such as Capita and Maximus, to name a few. Together, we must work to ensure that the narrative surrounding disability is one of support, understanding and respect rather than blame and neglect. Conference, my last point is one of caution. We must oppose the disability cut to PIP. We also must be ready for the coming war from this Labour government on the access to work. We already see a statement saying disabled people must work, yet backlogs to claiming access to work is making it difficult, especially for smaller companies to support disabled employees, with some claims taking up to 30 weeks. We are also seeing Labour are considering reducing the cap on claimants' access to work support, despite DWP figures showing that for every pound spent on access to work, the state makes back between £1.60 and £1.75. Conference, I ask that collectively we unite, send a loud message to Labour that we will not stand without a fight for disabled people and their right to live with choice, dignity and respect. I support.
Very good, Lee. Bang on time. Thank you, Lee. Great job. UCU, please, then. I will call NUJ. Please be ready. UCU.
President Congress, I want to put this discussion into a slightly wider agenda because these cuts affect us all of us. I'm Pat Roche, representing UCU, and UCU notes with anger the attacks at our disabled members. The most recent statement by the government argues that the welfare bill will protect the most vulnerable with robust protections in place. Well, I wouldn't like to think what the robust protections are because I can't find them. Congress, we know better. The government is using what I call spreadsheet politics. There is no alternative, it's all about the money. They argue that costs are spiralling at an unsustainable rate. They identify that anxiety and depression have increased on a massive scale, particularly among young people, and they speak of staggering costs. It is the language of a Labour Party. The staggering costs will be borne by our disabled workers. In an inaccessible society, disabled people already face barriers to accessing the workplace. Raise your hand if you think that you've got an inclusive workplace. Anybody raise their hand? Can I see anybody? No. There are no inclusive workplaces. We've had 14 years of a Conservative government who portrayed disabled individuals as work-shy benefit scroungers. Now, I'm a psychotherapist. It took me about 15 years, and I'm still carry on doing my learning. But Wes Streeton doesn't seem to need to be a psychotherapist. He's able to diagnose that there is an overdiagnosis of mental health conditions. Isn't that amazing? Without any training. The reality is that services are at a breaking point. I live in Blackpool, and in Blackpool, people die earlier. Many people in Blackpool become disabled because the conditions that they live in and the other coastal towns are really, really poor. So what we also need is we need the infrastructure to be sorted out. It isn't just about cutting benefits, it's about doing all the other things that we need. So I'm very fortunate I'm on the Disabled Members Workers Committee at Disabled TUC, and they are fighting very hard on your behalf, and we will continue to do that. So I want you to really take this forward, take it back to your workplaces, and demand that we change the script. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. NUJ, please, and then the final speaker in the debate, NASUWT. NUJ, please.
Thank you, President, for making time for this debate. Congress, Natasha Hirst, National Union of Journalists. Disabled people's rights and access are being attacked from every angle, but at the same time, we are being gaslit with the message that these attacks are somehow going to help us. The Minister was surprisingly quiet about this yesterday. Many disabled people in the creative industries are self-employed, but it's often because we're forced out of the labour market due to discrimination and lack of access. And as you heard on Monday, freelancing is precarious and often low paid. Universal credit isn't fit for purpose for us. There's no sick pay, no holiday pay, there's definitely no disability leave. So social security safeguards are vital for disabled people to access our rights, including our right to access employment. But the government is stripping those safeguards away without addressing the very real barriers that exclude us from employment and education and transport, health, housing, leisure, and everything else in our day-to-day lives. This is not a government that is supporting our right to independent living and inclusion. The cuts will force disabled people out of work. They will add more pressure to the already under-resourced NHS. social services, third sector organisations, and the frontline workers who run those services. We know that our lives and our contributions have value in our workplaces, in our trade unions, and in our communities. But successive governments have failed to recognise that. Now remember, these cuts are happening at the same time that assisted dying legislation is making its way through Parliament. The government will support us to die, but not to live well. Every time a politician undermines our humanity or presents us as a burden, it normalises hatred and discrimination and coercion against disabled people. The NUJ has worked hard to support our members to challenge and scrutinise these deeply unfair narratives. We've called out the regulators for not taking action on discriminatory reporting and broadcasting. But Congress, I cannot stress enough how relentless and frightening that these attacks have been, and there are more cuts to come. Every disabled activist that I know is completely burned out right now. We have never needed your solidarity more. But more importantly, we need your action, including on behalf of disabled people who can't work. It is a political choice to attack our rights. Disabled people and our organisations need the full weight of the trade union movement behind us. Congress, please support us.
Thank you, Natasha. NASUWT, please, to conclude the debate before I move to the vote on both motions.
Alan Hackett, NASUWT, the Teachers Union, speaking in favour of the motion. President, Congress. The NASUWT stands in solidarity with all disabled and neurodivergent people and continues to have grave concerns over the government's attempts to cut not just PIP and universal credit, but other areas of support, such as diagnostic pathways for neurodivergent people and access to work. The current government have made it very clear that they are not going to just continue the war on disabled people, but they are going to escalate it. We all hoped that the plans for support for disabled and neurodivergent people would bring significant pressure on all employers to remove the barriers for disabled workers. But yet again, we have been failed. Instead of increasing pressure on employers to make workplaces more accessible, the government has put the responsibility squarely at the door of disabled people. A government from a party that is supposed to reflect the social model of disability, not the medical one. With united pressure, the trade unions, along with trades councils, disabled people's organisations, managed to secure a significant stay of execution to the PIP changes. However, unless we maintain that pressure, that is all it will be. PIP is not an out-of-work benefit, yet our government continues to declare that removing it will enable people to work. They fail to understand that many disabled people use it to actually maintain work. PIP is there to close the gap that individuals face with the additional costs of disability. Many disabled workers use their PIP to fund the additional costs of getting to work and to meet the shortfall in reasonable adjustments, particularly those who are in precarious employment, such as supply teachers, who can fall under the radar when it comes to employers' responsibilities to make reasonable adjustments. Access to work waiting lists now mean a disabled worker could be waiting in employment for over 12 months before they get the support they need. For some, this might mean they've already been pushed out of work before that is put in place. There's also evidence to show that long-term access to work is already being cut. This dangerous rhetoric is also feeding a larger picture. It builds on 14 years of ableism, from the previous government. The portrayal of disabled and neurodivergent people is nothing short of discriminatory propaganda designed to cause division and harm to some of the most vulnerable people in society. And let's not forget that the UN have had the UK on warning concerning this treatment of disabled people since 2016. Mr. Timms, we have some suggestions for you. Stop wasting money by forcing disabled people to go to tribunal to appeal incorrect awards where nearly 3/4 of decisions are overturned. Stop allowing companies such as Maxima, Capita and Atos to profit from disabled people. Bring assessment back fully into public service. Start going after big corporations that seek to reduce or to avoid proper taxation, and start realising it could be anyone who suddenly finds their life changes and they need support from PIP or Universal Credit. Congress, please support the motion.
Thank you, Alan. Powerful intervention, Alan. Thank you. I now move for the vote. Vote on motion 38. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That's carried unanimously. Move to the vote on motion 39. Will all those in favour please show? Thank you. Will all those against please show? That's carried unanimously. Thank you, Congress.